Closing out a project in PataBid Quantify. So when you click on closing up at the top here, it takes you into the closeout module for the platform. The first step is to select a breakdown that you're going to run with for an estimate. Uh, Most often, depending on the nature of the estimate that you're working on, the drawing breakdown will be the easiest and simplest. It is always managed by the system and will automatically be populated with any drawings or documents that you've done takeoff on. Alternatively, if you've used the other breakdown buckets and facilities, you can use any of those to run your breakdown on. I'm going to select drawing here and click next. The next step is to go into your labor. And in here, you'll see that you've got a number of different crews. When you initially sign up, this will be blank. And then we've got our breakout of labor for this estimate. So the first step is to create a crew. When you click on the green Create a Crew button, the next step will be to populate the available peoples list here. Now, this can be any level of granularity. So you do not have to populate this with actual people. You can put in average rates, you can put in trade classifications, and to do so, you can select New Person. And then you can fill in the options here. So you might want to call this Apprentice First Year. And then you can select whether they're mechanical, HVAC, electrical for the trade classification, and you can put in the actual value for them. So this is a first year apprentice. We can call it $48 an hour and select Save. Alternatively, you can actually just call it an average rate. So if I want to just say average standard rate, I can do this, and let's say that it's $68 an hour, and I hit Save. And these will populate my list here. Then I can create my crew. So I'm going to call this default standard crew, for example, and I'm going to bring in the rates that I want. So I can do this with dragging and dropping in here. So if I had a fourth year, maybe a third year, and then a journeyman, for example, and it will then automatically calculate the average crew rate for me. Down here, we have a crew labor factor. Now, this is important for if this crew is going to be doing things like night work or overtime work or those sort of things. But for our standard crew, we're just going to leave this at 1. The next piece here is this global crew checkbox. If I turn this on, this crew will appear in all of my estimates. So for your standard default crew, you're most likely going to want to turn this on and have it as your kind of standard rate for all estimated projects initially starting out. If I leave this turned off, this crew is going to become specific to this bid and will not be visible anywhere else. Again, this is really useful for those moments where you're going to have the night work crew, that sort of thing, that may be specific to the conditions of this project you're bidding on. I can then hit save, and it's going to go into my list here. And we'll see here, I did not have that global crew turned on, so it does not have the global icon beside it. This crew is specific to this project. I can now drag and drop this crew into my list here and see that they go in and are assigned to that breakdown. And I can go along and assign them to every breakdown if I need to. This allows you to have flexibility in what crews are assigned to what projects. So if I had a separate crew that needed to be assigned for some different type of work in here, I can simply do that, and you'll see here that they are run independent on that breakdown. And this is also where the labor factoring comes into play here. So for example, this crew has a labor factor of 0.85, which means that we've reduced the labor by 15%. This crew can outperform the standard book values within our platform. And so we've gone from 70 hours to 60 hours for this breakdown. Now, if I needed to override that for any reason, I can override the hours directly. So I could type in 100 here, and it will then back calculate what my new overall factor is. Or I can type in a factor directly here. So for example, if this is going to be 0.9, I'm going to reduce it by 10% here. So you have control over the entire breakdown process for your labor. And at the end, it's going to tell you the factored labor hours for the project here and the total labor dollars now that have been modeled in here. If you need to override anything at any point, it is simply drag and drop to assign that crew in and reset it back to the defaults. This allows you to have tremendous flexibility in modeling the labor for your project. Once we have our labor dialed in, and this can be exported also directly to Excel for analysis and reporting outside of the platform if you need to have this reviewed by management or other partners. The next step once we're done with labor is to move into packages. Packages are your quoted materials on a project. Now within this specific estimate, we used our default template to open it up, so it has a couple of packages predefined in here. But let's say we needed to add something else in here. For example, if we were doing a fire sprinkler project, we might need to have a fire pump in here. So I can click on Create New Package. And then in here, I'm going to call this Fire Pump Skid. And so that gives the package a name. And then the next step is to add in the companies that we're expecting a quote from. So I may be expecting something from Armstrong on this, maybe TBD Pumps, something of that nature. Any number of different companies can be added in, and they go in along the top here. Now, if I had a tag in here, I could assign this into my package. This is most commonly done for, say, lighting, that sort of thing, and you can simply hit the green arrow beside the row here, or you can search. So if I search for tag here, I can assign these tags into my package here, and they come in with the quantities. This is a fire pump skid, so I don't need any lighting in here. But what we can do in this case is now add in custom scope lines. So if I had a fire pump P1 that I'm expecting to be priced by my suppliers here, and then I may be expecting them to handle the delivery and perhaps the shop drawings. Any of these sort of items, spare parts, all of these components that I'm expecting them to provision and include in their quotation. I can then download this as a request for quote package template. So when I click download BOM here, it's going to ask me where I want to save this. So I'll just put this in my downloads folder here for now. And then I will open this up. And here we go. This is what the default template looks like out of the box. Now this template can be modified, can be changed to your company's letterhead, your company's T's and C's, all of those things can be updated. This is just the default one that comes out of the box. And it includes the project names, my contact information, any of this sort of bill of materials that I have put into this RFQ here. And I can save this, send this out to my supplier. I can then click save in the bottom right here, and this will now save this package into my estimate, and it will sit here red until the quotes start to come in for this piece of equipment. And once those quotes start to come in, I can hop in here and I can see all of the scope of work that's in here. Now, if they are going to give me a lot price, what I'm going to do here is put in lot price. And let's say that they gave me a quote for $12,000 and these guys gave me a quote of, say, $14,000 in here. So I've got my two quotes entered in, but this now becomes my scope alignment matrix. So within here, as I'm going through the quotes, I may see that TBD pumps did not include delivery. Well, I know that that's going to be about $3,500, so I'm going to put a plug number in for that. And maybe, the spare parts weren't included in this one, so I can throw in a $500 adder for that. And here we go. I now have my scopes fully aligned. So when I look at these bottom numbers here, I am comparing apples to apples, and they are fully aligned. I can now hit the select button here to select the quote that I want to carry. I can also include notes in here. So for this note from Armstrong, I may fill in here and say, called John Doe, and he said, allow $500 for spare parts. Just so that I've got everything consolidated in here that went on during the chaos of closing out this estimate. Now when I hit save, it's going to show up in here in my packages. It's going to give me the value and the company that I carried for this quote. And I can click on this and see what that note was, or any notes that were part of that quote that I typed in. I can come back in here at any time, usually if we've won the project or we have to review something, and see exactly what went on that day of closing. The next step here, once we're completed with our packages, is to move into subcontracts. Subcontracts works effectively the same way. You can create new subcontracts. You can come in here and you can add in the various different scope items here. Again, if they've given you unit pricing, you can throw in whatever that unit pricing might be, and it will multiply it out, or you can fill in the total prices. And then you can select which one you're going to run with for each individual subcontract. So it works very similar to the packages system. After that, we move into equipment. Now, equipment is a little bit interesting. It works somewhat similar to labor in that you can add equipment into your estimate, but the first step is to create your equipment library. And this is your rental equipment. Now you can do this initially when you first sign up. This will be blank, but you can do this by clicking on the new equipment button here. And this allows us to enter in any pieces of equipment. Let's add in a photography drone, for example, and its rate is $350 an hour. And then we can say comes with operator, or any sort of notes that might be associated with this equipment. We can also add in calculated fields here. So for example, if we needed to include something travel or something of that nature in here, we can call this travel allowance. And then we can put in a fixed value here, or if we hover over the question mark here, we can also put in a formula. So we could call this, for example, equals duration times 20. So in this case, we're going to say, however long this is here, we're charging an extra $20 an hour for travel time for the operator. And then we can save this. And it goes into our overall list of equipment here, our library of equipment. And now I can simply select the piece of equipment that I want to add in, and I can click on Add. And here we go. We see that we have a couple of pieces of equipment in here. We've got this generator, but we also might have this drone. We need the drone for 4 hours, for example. And now we'll see down here that we've got our various different calculated fields. So the fuel has been calculated out. We might throw in a value here for the travel allowance so that that's included for the drone operator. And this way we can capture our consumables on any of these pieces of equipment that we need to bring into a project. So lifts, forklifts, people lifts, all of those kind of pieces in here, we can track within our library of equipment and assign it to estimates as needed. From there, we move into the overheads and indirects tables here. Not going to go into a lot of detail on this because every company has different methodologies of handling this. Different concepts of what an overhead is versus what an indirect is. But within here, we have the ability to add in arbitrary line items with rates, and all of this can also be pre-populated in your estimate assemblies, and that is the recommended practice if you use one of these tables. Pre-populate it within the template so every estimate you open brings these values in by default. But once it's in here, you can adjust the quantities. If I've got my home office here, but I'm going to need it for 1 month, there we go. I've now assigned that value into this estimate. Office trailers, same sort of thing, but maybe on this project I actually need 2 of them. It's a larger team that's going to be executing this project. And there we go. We've added that into our estimate now. Indirects work somewhat similarly to labor again in that you have indirect people that you can create in here. So project managers, schedulers, supervision, safety, really does depend on each individual's company's method for calculating these values out. Some companies include supervision in their average rates for lost productivity. Other companies may want to break that out. There are a number of different ways of capturing this in an estimate, and it entirely depends on how you want to track it in the project execution phase. Then we come to the final sale price here. So within the sale price, this is our final pricing sheet. And we can see in here, we've got our different markups. We can apply a very quick overall markup. If I say I want a standard markup of 20% on this size of project, but then we can adjust each individual line in here. So for example, if labor costs, I wanted to actually go out at 15%, but materials, I wanted to go out at 25% and basically give myself a bit of a buffer in there. We also have job expenses and profit columns here, depending on how you want to break down the final cost of your project. One of the unique things to the Quantify platform is the ability to modify this sale price table. I can add custom rows in here. So for example, if I needed to capture bonding on this project, I could put a fixed price in here, or what I can do again is hover over this question mark and I can dial in a formula. So if I'm at $25 per thousand for my bonding rates, I can dial that formula in here and hit save. And that is now going to track to my project. This is also another area where some companies prefer to handle their indirect labor calculations. So for example, if I edit this, I'm allowing 10% of my factored hours, which are the total hours on the project, by multiplying it by 0.1, and then $75 an hour as an indirect labor charge. I could also just use 10% of the factored dollars, the full labor dollars on the project. There's a number of different ways you can set up the formulas in here to capture your cost and have it automatically track to your project. This is another key one where for your company, put these rows into your templates so that they always come in pre-populated. And then if you don't need something on a project, you can simply delete it out of that estimate. But it becomes a key checklist for your projects. You can adjust the markups on these individual lines. So for example, for bonding, I may only want to put 10% on. And then what I get here is the new average overall markup for this project. I've got my anticipated profit dollars here, my total prime costs, or total prime costs with markup in, and then I can enter in taxes here, depending on how your jurisdiction handles that, if necessary. This can get very complicated. Sometimes actually handling the taxes with another formula here may be the better way to do it. There's a number of different methods of handling the taxes, depending on your jurisdiction's tax program. Then under here, we have our full breakdown. So this is the all-in breakdown for each line item that we went with. So we went with drawing, and we can see in here now what each drawing is worth all in. One of the key things here is cost allocation. So with these breakdowns, you'll see in here, for example, how the system has broken out all of the different components of our closeout, our materials, etc. So let's go back and take a look at packages here, for example, this column. It is related to the packages here. And so if I come in here and take a look at lighting, for example, I have this $5,000 quote for lighting. And down here, I have a table for breakout distribution. And this breakout distribution allows me to assign the values of this quote to different portions of my estimate. So for example, if I know that there's no lighting on this drawing 1, there's effectively no lighting on this E4, but all of my lighting is on E5 here, I can say put 100% of the value of that package into my drawing E5 breakdown. Now when I save this, I can go back to my sale price here, and I can see that the values have changed in here, and the allocations have moved around because I have fixed a certain cost to this drawing. Now, what can happen, either due to simple rounding here, you'll see we're about 2 cents out. We have this variance here. This variance is a key one to take a look at. It means that there is a 2 cent difference between the total plus tax of our project and the breakdown total. And this can typically happen. It will oftentimes be out 1 to 2 cents based on rounding errors, as it's producing the values in each one of these columns. 1 to 2 cents is perfectly normal. If it's much more than that, we need to figure out why. And what can happen here is if we go back to our package and we misallocate something here. So let's say that this was supposed to be 50-50, but we accidentally mistyped and we went 50-40. And so we can see that we only have 90% of this package actually allocated within this project. When I save this now and I go back to my sale price, it's going to flag that red. And what we can actually see here is we've got a total in our broken out packages of $19,000. Whereas if we look at the total for the packages line item, it's actually $19,500. And then when we break out the markups and all of that, it leads to a variance of about $614 on this project. But the key to take a look at here is this red area. This is telling us go back, take a look at your packages. Something is not allocated properly. And so we can hop back in here and we can take a quick look in the breakdown column and see, okay, yes, something didn't add up properly here. We only have 90% of this allocated. Let's hop back in here and change this to 50. There we go. Everything lines up properly now. Hit save. I go back to my sale price here. There's no more red in this area, and we're back to our simple rounded off pricing here. Once we have everything dialed in for our closeout, so we finished with our final pricing here, we can then go into proposal. And within proposal, we can click on new proposal here, and we can select a template to run our proposal on. Out of the box, you do get the sample proposal template, but you can upload your own. So these can be Word documents, these can be Excel documents, these can even be PowerPoint if you want. But at the end of the day, it is the method that you want to use to present your proposal to the client. So your scope letter, your lead letters, those sort of things, you can attach all of those in through the templates manager by clicking on this link, which will take you into the database editor, and you can upload your own proposal templates here in whatever format you use. You can then give it a name. I've already done a couple of different proposals in here, so I'm going to call this quote number 3, hit start, and when you click on this now, it's going to open this up in our online editor, our built-in Office suite. And so again, if you were to open up an Excel sheet in here, it would come in with the Excel editor, or PowerPoint if you were to use that. You could bring it in that way. And then I can start to edit this. So we could call this, or quote 1, 2, 3, 5 here, fill in the dates, the information here. Once I'm ready with my price and I've got, all of my scope filled in, everything that I'm submitting here, I can select copy table here and hit next and select the columns that I want to bring in, the rows that I want to bring in, copy this in, and then right click where I want this in my document and paste it. Now, if it does come in blank, sometimes this can happen depending on your browser. It's not actually blank, it's just the text has been set to white. You can simply hit the font color here to reset it to black, and you'll see all of the values in here for that table. And then once I'm done creating my proposal document, I can come up here and click download and download this as a PDF or a Word document, whatever I may need. And this is what I can send out to my client as our final document for this proposal. And that completes our overview of Closeout in PataBid Quantify.